Right.
Okay.
Everything looks good, everything sounds good. We're on.
Gurinder, I told you that when you were here before, I remember I ended the interview saying, I do hope we'll meet again because I so enjoyed talking with you.
Well, thank you. And I'm really pleased to be here again. And it's lovely to see you looking so well. And thank you.
Of course, you were here for Bend It Like Beckham. And at the time, there was some momentum already for it. But did you have any idea?
None at all. I thought it would do reasonably well in a few art house cinemas across the US. I had no idea that it was going to take off like it did. And I mean, it played in some cinemas for like months and months and months. And even now, as I go around and meet people, as soon as people realize I made Bend It Like Beckham, their eyes seem to water up and they get very misty-eyed and go, oh, I loved that movie. And so it's a very warm feeling in my heart, you know, to hear people say how much they enjoyed the film.
Now, is this new film, is it the first project you've had since Beckham?
Yes, Bride and Prejudice is my new film, a big sort of colourful musical, and I made it straight after Beckham. But it took me a long time. It took me 2 years to make this movie because it's so huge. It takes place in 3 continents, you know, England, America, and India. It has actors from 3 countries as well, and it's just... It's kind of like the old-fashioned Hollywood musicals of the 40s, but it's got an Indian flair to it and a British flair, which is really, you know, the combination of what I am.
One of the things that early on in the film that impressed me was, and really made me stop and think, because usually Americans, the image that is portrayed of India, you know, it's kind of the cattle in the roads
Yes.
and the streets,
Yes.
and very crowded and dusty, and you know, people living on very minimum standards.
Yes.
Now we see that this is a family living very well. Would you consider them middle class, or are they the wealthy class?
I would consider them middle class, slightly upper middle class. Their house is beautiful, but it's falling apart at the edges. You know, so there was a time when they were doing much better than they were. You know, and if you look closely, you'll see the paint's peeling off and the roof's leaking. But India is a country with lots of different types of areas, and there are cities in India that look much like Dallas. I mean, big skyscrapers, very modern buildings. I mean, there's a whole city area that's like Silicon Valley. The capital, Delhi, is very green, with lots of trees and boulevards. So the general image people have of India is that rural, kind of poverty-stricken country. And there are those elements, absolutely. But what I wanted to show in this film was that there's also a very modern India, which Lolita, actually the heroine, represents. A very modern India, a very proud India, proud of all the achievements that it's been making of late. And in India, there is a massively growing middle class where ordinary families now are able to own houses, own cars, go on holidays, travel abroad. People who want to stay in India and live and work in India rather than travel abroad. And that was the kind of India I wanted to represent in this movie.
How much about India did you know? Because you grew up in London.
That's right. I grew up in London. My grandparents were from India originally, and I've never lived in India. But obviously, being Indian, you know, I have a good knowledge of the country. But to me, you know, I had spent a year when I was a student traveling around India, and particularly in this small town called Amritsar, which is in the north of India, and that's where I set the film because I knew the town well. And one of the things that was so surprising to me when I came upon the idea of taking Jane Austen's fantastic novel and adapting it into this kind of cultural musical, one of the things that was really striking was that even though Jane Austen was writing in England in the 1790s, 90s, the world that she was writing about, a world where women were not really considered whole unless they were married. Women weren't really supposed to speak out and be seen as being sort of intelligent. Women weren't supposed to go out and get men. Their mothers were supposed to introduce them to men. All these things, although 200 years old in Britain, were completely appropriate for contemporary India, and particularly small towns like Amritsar. And just like Jane Austen has with her fabulous heroine Lizzie Bennet from the novel, she has a woman who tries to stand aside from all these rules and regulations and expectations of women. In the same way, I found a lot of Lizzie Bennets alive and well in India, and particularly in towns like Amritsar, where the movie's set. So it made perfect sense to me to set it, in that small town.
It is what they call a Bollywood movie.
Yes.
And with lots of lavish musical numbers and very bright, saturated colors and all. I love the look of it very much. Is all of the music original music?
Yes. All the music is original. It was composed by my choice of a big popular Bollywood music director called Anu Malik, and I wanted to go with him because he's very authentic Bollywood, rather than go with a Western composer who would try and make it sound Bollywood. And in the mix, Anu sort of did the Bollywood sound, but sort of made it palatable to Western ears as well. So some of the songs are more traditional, sort of Bollywood style, with lots of violins and lots of sort of romantic kind of sounds. And then some are quite modern as well. For example, there is a song which Ashanti sings in the movie, the young black singer from America. And that's a very modern kind of sound. And Anu did that as well as the more traditional Bollywood style songs.
How did you happen to put her in the film?
Well, in Bollywood films, there's a formula. They're normally 3 hours long. They're normally filled with beautiful people, lots of lavish costumes, lots of lavish locations, a lot of color, spectacle, scale. And there's also always what we call an item number. And the item number is when a beautiful girl comes on and does a song, normally in a cabaret setting. And I wanted to maintain that tradition, but I really wanted to have a young black girl in the movie, just because it's something I know nobody else would ever do. And it was perfect for my movie. And Ashanti was very keen to be involved in a movie, and she flew out to India with all her entourage and learnt the choreography and did the dance and performed really well.
One of the numbers that is such fun is called Life Without Wife.
Yes.
Now, in fact, is that a saying in India?
Well, interestingly, my father, used to say, the saying is actually no life without wife. And my father would often sit amongst his friends who would all be complaining about their wives, for one reason or another. And at the end of the conversation, he would always say, still, there's no life without wife, And it was quite funny. My dad had a lot of sayings like that. And so I loved that. And so we put that actually into the movie. And that's a very catchy song. And no life without wife is absolutely true. My husband's far away in London right now while I'm here in Dallas. And he certainly agrees with the no life without wife scenario.
Excuse me. I understand that you got the idea for Bride and Prejudice while you were washing dishes one day.
Well,
What triggered that?
Well, often, when you do these kind of menial tasks is when your brain is sort of thinking, and often when I'm doing housework, it's when I get really good ideas. I don't often do housework, but I was washing up, and I had been thinking about doing a Bollywood-style movie for a long time, but I just didn't know how to do it, because I didn't want to do a full-on Bollywood movie, because people in India were doing that, and they did it really well, and that wasn't really my style. The breakthrough for me came when I decided, okay, I would do a Bollywood-style movie, but I would blend it with Hollywood cinema and make a movie that is in the Indian style, but that will appeal to a Western audience. And once I'd clarified who my Western audience was, which was basically my Bend It Like Beckham audience, then I decided I needed a good story that they would be familiar with, so they wouldn't be frightened off by the different filmic style. And I was thinking, well, if I'm going to take this very extreme Indian style of filmmaking, let's go right to the other extreme. What's the complete opposite in terms of stories? And of course, the devil in me, my sense of humor, was, well, let's take the most English, traditionally English literary classic that I can think of, and that was Jane Austen and Pride and Prejudice. And I had studied the novel at school like everybody else, and I had loved the BBC series with Colin Firth, and I thought that they had done a great job on that. So to me it seemed like right pickings to give Jane Austen the sort of cultural makeover treatment, and I was thrilled then when we started working it out and saw how closely Jane Austen's world fitted with the contemporary Indian world. And one of the few times I got nervous about the film when it was finished was when the Jane Austen Society in England and in North America, when they wanted to screen the film. And I thought, oh my goodness, let's see, what they make of it. And thankfully, for me, in both countries, they really appreciated the film. And in North America, they appreciated it so much that they've made me an honorary lifetime member of the Jane Austen Society. Because I'm hoping after seeing my film, people will go back and read the novel, because it's such a wonderful novel. And you don't have to have read the novel to appreciate the film, but if you are familiar with the novel, I think you get extra pleasure, because I think part of the pleasure for me with watching this film is to go back to the novel and go, oh, this is how they did this. Oh, this is that character from the novel. Oh, that's interesting. I like doing that in movies, and I hope audiences appreciate that.
One of the things I didn't know until I started reading up on this film is that in Indian movies, kissing is not permitted.
Yes.
The censors don't allow kissing.
Kissing, sex, or nudity. Yes. That's a very traditional sort of Indian culture thing. And I think that, some things are meant to be private. And in Indian movies, they're very sensual. I mean, the dancing is very sensual. The looks towards couples are very sensual. And I think they just feel that you don't need to have the sort of full-on depiction in bed, or the physical stuff, to bring over the sense of romance and love. And so I wanted to follow that rule in this film as well. So I didn't, have any kind of nudity or sex or kissing in that matter, but also the actress, Aishwarya Rai, who plays the lead, she didn't want to have any kissing in the movie either. So, we followed the Bollywood tradition. But I think also me, being a good Indian girl, I don't go out of my way to make movies that don't have sex scenes, but I think being an Indian girl, there's a side of me that's a little reticent about shooting that, and I think there's something in the back of my head where I know that my mum would be really cross and really upset if I did do that. So I kind of end up making movies that don't have those kind of scenes in them.
In India, when people greet one another, is it not proper to embrace and kiss in public?
Yes, it's not proper. People hug and touch, but kissing is very intimate, and it's not meant to be for public, for the public viewership.
I really can't criticize that. I cannot criticize that. Not at all. I think, that as far as films that just lay it all out there, I feel when I have to look at those films as a bit of a voyeur. And I would just as soon they not have quite so much kissing, one thing. But then kissing has changed, so
right.
My stars.
Well, I think that sometimes it's very easy in a movie to just cut to a couple kissing or being in bed without really building up the romance or the love. that leads to those sort of acts. And I think sometimes it's an easy way out to just, to let your audience feel, oh, they're in love now because they're kissing. Whereas if they can't kiss, you have to show the romance, in a deeper way and sort of apply more storytelling to that.
Well, this is a very romantic story, and I really didn't think about the kissing and didn't miss it until I started reading the production notes, and then I thought, that's right, they didn't have any kissing.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's.
Mind you, Indians don't shy away from that kind of stuff because, there's a population of 1 billion in that country. So, it does happen, but just not on the cinema screen.
Another thing that I was interested in is that every day you started the shooting with a prayer to the camera.
Yes, that's a very Indian tradition from India. I mean, I've never done it in England, but in India, my camera crew was all Indian, and the camera is seen in some ways as a kind of deity, something to be worshipped. And so every morning, one of the camera team would take a coconut and put some incense on the top of it and burn some of it, so there'd be a flame at the top of this coconut, and then they'd go up to the camera and they'd do a sort of little prayer like this for the camera, and then that person would carry that coconut with the flame to everybody, and everybody would just sort of put their hands like that and pay a little respect, and then they would break the coconut, and then everybody would have a piece. And it's a wonderful moment. It's a wonderful way of starting the day because it just makes you sort of feel like there's a bigger purpose to what you're doing, and that the camera is, of course, the livelihood for a lot of these people, and it's a way of just sort of stopping and giving thanks and appreciating, what we're doing, I guess. And I think India's a very spiritual country, and Indians are generally very spiritual. And, some say they would worship anything, but it's also a way of just taking stock and appreciating the bigger things in life, I think.
And also, it's I should think, sort of a prayer to bless the day's work.
Absolutely, yes. I've seen actors in India, big actors, as soon as they walk on set, the first thing they do is go straight up to the camera and touch the camera and put it to their forehead as a kind of blessing. And it's to bless them that they do good work and that they perform well, and just take a minute to sort of thank, a higher being for being there,
And maybe to have a silent prayer that the cameraman stays in focus, that they don't have to do 45 takes.
Yeah, maybe.
I don't mean to make light of it.
No, not at all, no. I mean, what was interesting was that originally, just the Indians did it. And then as the days wore on, all the English crew got very interested in it. And so you'd find sort of halfway through the shoot that it wasn't just the Indians who were going like this over the flame. All the English crew were also wanting to go up and have a little bit of it. They were all going like that too. And that was wonderful. In fact, that was the most wonderful sides of making this film, was that I had crew and cast from India, England, and America on the movie. And it was wonderful to see how they all got over their differences, cultural differences, linguistic differences, professional differences, different ways of doing things, how they brought all these different elements to work, and how we all worked through to find a middle ground, because we were making such an innovative movie that was such a cultural blend of all three continents.
I really think because of your reputation, and I think the word of mouth on this will be very good. But do you feel more pressure with this film?
I feel a lot of pressure with this film because I'm sure a lot of people are going to come to the cinema thinking, oh, this is the same filmmaker who made Bend It Like Beckham, and perhaps expect to see another movie that's like Bend It Like Beckham. And of course, this is very different. Although it does have the same sense of humor, and it does have a lot of the same cultural elements as Bend It Like Beckham. But it is a different cup of tea, and it is a musical. and I do feel that box office sort of pressure because Beckham performed so well. So I hope I can bow to your better knowledge and feel that it will be a word-of-mouth movie, because I think once people walk into the cinema, I think they will have a good time. I think the question is just letting people know that they may think it's a movie that's not for them, but actually it's a movie that will transport them to the other side of the world and back, and they'll have a lot of fun.
Oh, I thoroughly enjoyed it. I enjoyed it from so many different aspects. What I learned about Indian people and the Indian culture, and just the joy and the happiness of the music and the pageantry and everything. Very well done, Gurinder.
Well, thank you, Barbara. Thank you.
All right, now you know the drill sheet
Yeah.
as well.
Yes,
Okay,
I
all right. Why did you want to make one of these Bollywood movies?
Well, I grew up with in Britain, in London, at a time where there was an English cinema in my high street where I saw The Sound of Music and The Wizard of Oz and all these great American movies. And then a mile down the road, there was an Indian cinema which had these huge, extravagant Bollywood movies. And I would get taken to those cinemas as well. And then on the television, I saw lots of lovely old English black and white movies. So I grew up with all three movie styles, and I wanted to make this film to combine those three movie styles.
That's fine. Okay, I'll just wave you off. I'll just
Fine.
let
Yeah,
you start.
I
let you go on that one.
I know, because I said something different, didn't
No,
I?
that was fine.
Okay.
Okay. One of the things I noticed right away about this film is that it's not the usual vision of India. I mean, these people live quite well, don't they? Are they middle class, would you say?
Yes, they're middle class, maybe slightly upper middle class. But India's...
Okay. You have set this on 3 different continents, haven't you?
This was really hard work. Making this movie was really hard work. But it was a lot of fun too, but it was,
That's good.
yeah.
Okay. I learned from this movie that in Indian movies, kissing is not allowed. The censors don't permit it.
Yes, no kissing, no sex, no nudity.
All right. Is this part of India's culture that people do not kiss in public?
Well, in India, shows of physical affection like kissing, you know, they're supposed to be private, you know. You very rarely see couples doing that, you know, in public, and so people don't want it on the screen either.
Okay. Right. I understand that while you're making this movie, every day starts with a prayer.
Yes, every morning someone from the camera team would take a coconut and put a little incense stick on it, light it, and then go up to the camera and do this.
One of the songs, one of the musical numbers,
Is No Life Without Wife, yeah.
No Life Without Wife. One of the musical numbers is It's No Life Without Wife. Is that something that Indian people say?
Well, actually, that's pinched from my dad. It was something my dad used to say when all his friends would get together and they would all sort of complain about their wives. And he would say, well, yes, but at the end of the day, there's no life without wife. And I think my husband is feeling that right now with me so many miles away here in Dallas while he's in London.
Okay. Hang on just one second.
Sure.